On July 4th, my sister looked at me in the middle of the family party and said, "We're gonna sell your piece of land," in front of everyone. Fernanda has always been the star of the family, the successful businesswoman surrounded by cameras and applause. Me, the forgotten brother, the dreamer she said had been left behind. But what she never imagined was that the loser here had a secret. She wanted to sell the past, but I didn't know that I was already buying the future. And when she discovered who really owned everything, it was too late.
The late afternoon sun spread across the horizon as Thiago stepped out of the car in front of the old wooden gate. The property, with its fruit trees and the familiar smell of damp earth, seemed frozen in time. Every corner held childhood memories, races with his sister, afternoons helping his mother in the garden, the simple laughter of a time that already seemed distant. He took a deep breath, feeling his heart tighten between nostalgia and peace. Inside the house, the sound of excited voices echoed down the hallway. Relatives he hadn't seen in years were gathering, decorating the place with little flags and traditional dishes. It was the traditional 4th of July lunch, a tradition inherited from Dona Lucia, his mother, who loved to celebrate the independence of feelings. Thiago smiled discreetly, trying to ignore the nervousness he felt at the thought of seeing Fernanda again. While helping Mr. Batista set up the tables in the backyard, the older man commented, "The house misses genuine laughter, Mr. Thiago. Today will be a day for remembrances." Thiago responded only with a nod. The wind swayed the curtains on the porch, and he realized how much that place still pulsed with his mother's presence. Suddenly, the sound of an expensive engine cut through the tranquil air. A gleaming black car pulled up in front of the gate. Fernanda got out in high heels, sunglasses, and a practiced smile. Behind her, a small film crew carried cameras and microphones. "I can't believe she brought the press here," Thiago murmured, pursing his lips. She walked towards him with firm steps, her expensive perfumes mingling with the scent of lavender from the field. Fernanda gushed, "Thiago, I thought you weren't even coming." He replied calmly, "I've never stopped coming, Fernanda. I just don't arrive with so much noise." The curt reply made the air heavy, but she simply laughed and continued greeting the guests. During lunch, the relatives settled under the awning decorated with little flags. Between glasses of wine and casual conversation, Fernanda seemed to hold everyone's attention. Thiago observed from afar, preferring the corner near the kitchen, where the smell of roast chicken mingled with the distant sound of laughter. However, something within him was beginning to unsettle. Every word his sister spoke seemed rehearsed, every gesture calculated. It was as if she were there not to celebrate the family, but to promote herself. When a reporter approached to document the launch event, Thiago understood that this lunch was about to take a different turn. As fireworks began to light up the sky, Fernanda climbed onto a small makeshift platform, smiling at the cameras. "Today, in addition to celebrating our emotional independence," she began, "I'm officially launching my company's new line, a symbol of overcoming challenges and courage." Applause erupted automatically, but Thiago kept his gaze fixed, trying to decipher what was to come.
She looked directly at her brother, with an almost cruel glint in her eyes. "And speaking of independence, I think it's time we broke free from the past that leads us nowhere." The murmur from the audience grew louder. "I've decided to sell the family farm." The sound of the wind ceased for a moment. Thiago simply lowered his gaze without saying a word. July 4th, once a symbol of unity, had just become the day the family silently parted ways. Sometimes silence speaks louder than 1,000 words. and destiny holds lessons that only time reveals. If you also believe that every family has secrets and twists and turns that change everything, subscribe to the channel now, because the most powerful stories are the ones that speak directly to the heart. The guests exchanged uncomfortable glances, unsure whether to applaud or lament. Fernanda maintained a forced smile, savoring the impact of her words. This place was important to our childhood, but we need to look to the future. Progress requires letting go. The cameras captured her every gesture, while Thiago remained motionless, observing her with a calmness that seemed to provoke his irritation even more. Mr. Batista, from afar, shook his head in disapproval. The old man knew that this property represented more than just land and wood. It was the soul of the Batista family. "She forgot what her mother used to say, boy," he said to Thiago. "Whoever cuts the roots falls with the wind." Thiago took a deep breath and replied, "Sometimes it's the wind that shows what's still standing." When dinner ended, tension hung in the air like a fog. Some relatives said their hurried goodbyes, others feigned normalcy. Fernanda, however, seemed radiant. "I'm signing the preliminary contract tomorrow," she announced, toasting with champagne. "It's a great deal. We'll finally be free from this stagnant life." Thiago picked up his glass of juice and raised it silently, simply saying, "May it be the best for us all." Her sister's gaze narrowed. "Best for whom, Thiago? You'll finally learn that the world doesn't revolve around sentimentality." He just smiled without answering. Later, as night fell and the guests dispersed, Thiago walked to the orchard. The lights of the lanterns danced on the grass, and the distant sound of a cicada marked the end of the day. He sat down under the old tree he had planted with his mother and whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom. I tried to keep everything the same." Mr. Batista approached slowly. "Is she really going to sell it?" he asked. Thiago gazed at the sky, thoughtful. "Yes, but she has no idea what she's selling. Not everything that's lost can be bought back." The old man nodded, understanding the tone. The following morning, while Fernanda was heading to the city with her entourage, Thiago entered the small office he kept in the neighboring town. On the computer, the name of a company shone on the screen, Holding Raíces S.A. He typed a few quick instructions and finished with a click.
The fate of the property had just changed, and no one but him knew. The following week brought headlines and social media posts. Entrepreneur Fernanda Batista announces international expansion. The video of the lunch at the farm went viral, and many praised her for her courage to let go of the past. Thiago, however, watched everything in silence, sitting at the counter of his small cafe, while the radio played old songs that reminded him of his mother. Over the weekend, Fernanda organized a press conference at the property itself, inviting the media to witness the symbolic signing of the sales contract. Cameras and reporters scattered throughout the garden, while her sister gave a speech with a theatrical glint in her eyes. Thiago stood in the background, observing with the same calm expression that so irritated Fernanda. "This place represents what we were," she said, "but also what we've ceased to be. Progress demands tough choices, and I'm not afraid of them." The words echoed among the guests, followed by superficial applause. Thiago remained motionless, his hands crossed. When her gaze met his, he knew the blow was coming. "My brother still insists on living nearby, taking care of a modest business," she teased with a mocking smile. "But not everyone is born to success, is that right?" The audience chuckled softly, and the cameras captured the exact moment Thiago looked away, serene.
Thiago's heart tightened, not because of the insult, but because of the memory of his mother, who used to say, "The fruits only appear after the roots have withstood the weight of the rain." He took a deep breath and simply replied, "That's true, sis. Not everyone needs to rush to get there first." Silence filled the room, and for a few seconds, Fernanda lost control of her expression. After the event, she approached him with firm steps. "You could at least try to be proud of me, Thiago." He replied without resentment, "I would be proud if I saw happiness in what you do." She huffed, adjusting her expensive necklace. "Happiness is a consequence of those who win, not those who wait." Later, Thiago walked alone through the property, watching the lights gradually go out. With each step, he remembered his mother's hands, the smell of cornbread, the days when Fernanda laughed freely. What remained of her now was a woman surrounded by cameras and fear. As the night wind blew, he picked up his cell phone and sent a short message to his lawyer. "Start the process, without rushing, but with determination." The lawyer replied minutes later, "Understood. Raíces Holding will take over Terra Prime negotiations tomorrow."
Thiago closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the distant sound of cicadas. The game had begun, and as always, in silence. The next day, the sky dawned gray. The air was thick, heavy, as if the place itself felt the weight of the words spoken the day before. Thiago found Mr. Batista in the shed, cleaning old tools covered in dust. "Are you going to let her sell them, boy?" the old man asked, his eyes filled with concern. Thiago replied calmly, adjusting a loose plank. "Sometimes you have to let the other person fall to understand the value of the ground." Batista let out a long sigh. "But the ground also hurts." Thiago smiled slightly. "Yes, but it's from it that we learn to get up." The two continued talking as the rain began to fall lightly. Thiago, between sips of coffee, revealed what he had never told anyone. His small cafe in the city was just the visible tip of something much bigger. He was the founder of Flor do Campo Network, a national franchise of natural and sustainable products present in more than 100 cities across the country. Batista's eyes widened. "And you never told anyone?" Thiago shook his head. "People need to see me for who I am, not for what I have. The family name became too small in the world, and I wanted to let it grow in silence." Batista smiled proudly. Dona Lucia would have been moved. The conversation was interrupted by a notification on Thiago's cell phone. An email from the lawyer confirmed, "Purchase of Terra Prime finalized. The site is protected." He breathed a sigh of relief, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. "There. Now all that's left is to wait for fate to take care of teaching us." Meanwhile, back in the city, Fernanda was celebrating in her modern office. The sales contract was underway, and the down payment was already shining in her account. She had no idea that the buyer who had interrupted the deal was in fact her own brother, whom she despised. That night, Thiago returned to the orchard. The rain had stopped, and the smell of wet earth filled the air. He walked to the old fig tree and looked at the dark sky, murmuring, "Mother, today I protected what is ours." A ray of light cut through the clouds, and the thunder that followed sounded as an answer. Deep down, he knew the battle wasn't won. Fernanda would still fight, not out of love for her family, but out of pride. And it was precisely that pride he needed to let burn away before she could rise again. The morning Fernanda went to sign the final contract dawned bright and dry. The blue sky seemed to celebrate along with her as she found herself once again in the spotlight. Dressed in shades of white and gold, the successful businesswoman arrived at Terra Prime headquarters with a team of photographers ready for another self-promotion show. "Today, a new era begins," she declared to the press, posing with a pen in hand.
While she smiled for the cameras, Thiago watched the scene from afar on the computer screen in his small office. The scanned document appeared in his email minutes later, the same one he had already blocked through holding Raíces. All it took was his signature to suspend the contract. He didn't hesitate. One simple click, and fate changed. Fernanda didn't immediately realize what had happened. The flashes were still blinking, and congratulations multiplied around her. But deep down, a shadow of unease was already forming. "Strange. They said the transfer would happen in real time," she commented to the assistant. The man nervously replied, "It must just be a technical delay, doctor." Late in the afternoon, Thiago went to the property. He walked among the overgrown flower beds and felt his heart clench with longing. "If she only knew how much it cost to keep this alive," he murmured. Mr. Batista appeared with a hoe in his hands and asked, "Is it done?" Thiago replied calmly, "It's saved, but she'll still think she won." In the city, Fernanda toasted with friends and investors. "We did it," she shouted, raising a glass of sparkling wine. "Now I can expand to Europe." Her enthusiasm was contagious, but the broker who avoided her gaze knew something he couldn't reveal. The acquiring company had been purchased that very day by a holding company with national capital. At night, Thiago reviewed market reports and discreetly observed the impact of the new acquisitions. Everything was under control. "It will take her a while to realize," he commented on the phone to his lawyer. "Let time take care of the irony." On the other end of the line, the lawyer replied, "You have a special talent for silent justice, Dr. Thiago." Lying in bed, Thiago reread old letters from his mother. In one of them, Dona Lucia had written, "Money buys walls, but love builds bridges." He closed his eyes, feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. Nothing he did was for revenge, it was only for her memory. Meanwhile, Fernanda was receiving alarming messages. The property transfer has been suspended due to an internal audit. The system identified inconsistencies in the buyer's CNPJ, Brazilian tax ID number. With each new notification, her smile faded. "This is impossible," she whispered. "I reviewed the contract myself." When she called the broker, the answer was evasive. The company was acquired by another group, a holding company called Raíces. Fernanda frowned. "Raíces? What a ridiculous name!" She hung up angrily, without imagining the symbolic weight of that name. The wind was blowing strongly that night, and at the farm, Thiago gazed at the same sky as she did. They both believed they were in control, unaware that the real conflict was only just beginning. 2 days later, social media began to buzz. Influencers who had received samples of the new Independence Beauty cosmetics line started posting videos with the same symptoms: redness, irritation, and itching. "I used the product from businesswoman Fernanda Batista and it gave me an allergic reaction," one of them exclaimed, in a tone of complaint. Within a few hours, Fernanda's name rose to become one of the most talked about topics. Hashtags like independent bankruptcy and toxic beauty, they spread like wildfire. Sales plummeted and investors began withdrawing their support. What had been an empire began to crumble before her eyes as she screamed into the phone, "Solve this now!" In the office, the atmosphere was a panic. Employees rushed out, the legal department tried to contain lawsuits, and inventory was being returned en masse. Fernanda paced back and forth, her heels echoing like gunshots on the marble floor. "This can't be happening," she repeated, her eyes brimming with tears. Meanwhile, Thiago maintained his normal routine. At the town cafe, he served customers, chatted with farmers, and discreetly followed the news on his cell phone. Batista, who was watching him attentively, asked him, "And now, Thiago, are you going to tell her?" He calmly replied, "Not yet. First, silence needs to teach." That same day, Terra Prime, the company that was going to buy the property, sent Fernanda an official statement. Negotiation suspended due to change in shareholding control. She crumpled the paper angrily and threw it on the table. "Who is this damned owner of this Raíces place?" No answer came. The following weeks were a nightmare. News reports, memes, criticism, everything seemed to turn against her. And for the first time, Fernanda found herself alone. Her friends disappeared, her investors vanished, and the mirror reflected a face she barely recognized. Thiago, on the other hand, walked peacefully through the orchard. The property was beginning to be reborn. The green was shining again, the birds were returning. He felt that, little by little, time was restoring what pride had destroyed. "Everything is returning to the place it should never have left," he murmured. In a symbolic gesture, he planted a new fig tree sapling next to the old one, the same spot where, as a child, he had made a pact with Fernanda. "We're never going to sell this, okay?" The memory of her laughter pierced him like an arrow. And as the sky darkened, the phone vibrated. It was a short message from the lawyer. "This site is legally controlled by Holding Raíces. No sale is possible without their authorization." Thiago simply replied, "Perfect. Now let pride flourish until it falls away on its own." The morning began with Fernanda slamming the office doors, the sound echoing like thunder. Her made-up face concealed deep dark circles under her eyes, and her cell phone wouldn't stop vibrating with messages from lawyers, journalists, and creditors. "Suspend the sale of the property? Why?" she shouted, while the broker tried to explain. "The new owner of Terra Prime doesn't recognize the previous contract."
"And who is this new controlling company?" he asked in the cold tone of someone on the verge of collapse. "A holding company called Raíces, Mum." Fernanda gave a bitter laugh. "It sounds like an NGO name. It has to be." But inside, something was beginning to unsettle her. Raíces. The word sounded familiar, almost symbolic. That same afternoon, she got in her car and drove to the farm without telling anyone. She wanted to confront Thiago. When she arrived, she found him weeding near the orchard, with the same calm look and the same simple clothes as always. "I see you are still content with little," she said, trying to hide her nervousness. He smiled, wiping the sweat from his brow. "And you? I see you still don't understand what enough is." Fernanda crossed her arms. "Did you know that? Did you know the buyer would back out?" Thiago paused for a moment, looked her in the eyes, and replied calmly, "Some things don't need to be bought, just preserved." She laughed scornfully. "That cheap philosophy of yours isn't going to pay my debts." Thiago simply walked to the balcony, where a photograph of his mother still rested in an old frame. "She taught you so much, Fernanda. It's a shame you chose to forget." Fernanda hesitated for a moment. Her hard gaze softened into weakness, but she quickly raised her voice again. "I don't have time for nostalgia." Before leaving, she uttered one last sentence. "When this place falls apart, you'll be begging me to sell it." Thiago replied calmly, "Maybe, but I'll still have somewhere to fall. I don't know about you." The sound of the car speeding down the road echoed for long seconds until it faded into the dust. In the following days, chaos completely ensued. Fernanda's company was the target of audits, protests, and lawsuits. Magazines that had previously called her a visionary now labeled her a fraud. She lost contracts, employees, and credibility. Meanwhile, Thiago was forging new partnerships with local cooperatives. His network of sustainable products was growing quietly, feeding families and generating jobs. Roots grow slowly, but they are the only ones that can withstand the weight of the storms, he told a young employee as he signed a new agreement. That night, Fernanda cried for the first time in years. Alone in her luxurious, empty apartment, she realized that silence was the most expensive sound in the world. The following weeks turned Fernanda's empire into ruins. Lawsuits piled up, and her company's stock plummeted. The office doors were sealed by inspectors, and employees disappeared like leaves in the wind. The businesswoman who boasted of controlling everything now faced her own reflection, without makeup, without applause, without disguises.
In the midst of the collapse, she received unexpected news. The developer that was going to buy the property had been officially absorbed by Holding Raíces. "What do you mean?" she asked her lawyer, who replied, "It's a legitimate acquisition. They now have full control over the properties and assets." The name Raíces echoed in her head again, like an omen. Desperate, Fernanda began to investigate. She searched through documents, reports, and corporate records, and then she found what she feared most. Holding Raíces was 100% Brazilian-owned, founded by Thiago Batista. The ground seemed to disappear beneath her feet. "No, it can't be him!" The tears came without warning. She remembered all the times she had called him a failure, the public humiliations, the disdain. And now, she was discovering that the brother she had considered insignificant had built something much greater, and with values she had despised her entire life. She tried calling him, but the phone went to voicemail. She sent messages, all unanswered. With each failed attempt, the guilt transformed into physical pain. "I destroyed everything, and he let me see what it costs." Meanwhile, Thiago was at the farm, restoring the old wooden veranda. He worked in silence, his hands covered in dust and his heart light. "She needs to reach the end to start again," he commented to Batista, who watched with tired but wise eyes. "Yes, sometimes you have to lose everything to find what matters," the old man replied. That night, Fernanda rummaged through an old box containing her mother's belongings. Inside, she found a folded, yellowed note. "Children, if pride ever separates you, remember that the earth does not reject anyone who treats it with love." The paper trembled between his fingers. She then got in the car and drove to the farm, along the dark road. The moon illumined the path, and memories came like ghosts. Childhood, laughter, the smell of her mother's coffee. Upon arriving, she parked slowly. She saw Thiago sitting on the porch, playing the guitar. He looked up, serene, as if he had been expecting her. "It took you long enough, sis." His voice was calm, without resentment. She simply replied, her voice choked with emotion. "I lost everything, Thiago." He nodded. "Then, now you can start over." The early morning hours at the farm were serene. The distant sound of crickets and the smell of damp earth filled the air. Thiago, sitting on the porch, watched the sunrise paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. When he heard discreet footsteps behind him, he didn't turn around. He already knew it was Fernanda. "I couldn't sleep," she said softly. He simply replied, "The earth also takes time to rest after the storm." She sat down beside him, hugging her knees. The silence between them was heavy, but not hostile. It was the silence of those who have much to say and no longer know where to begin. "You knew I was going to fall, didn't you?" she asked, looking at the ground. Thiago hesitated before answering. "I only knew that you needed to stop flying without seeing the ground."
Fernanda's eyes filled with tears. "I destroyed everything I built, Thiago. What must you think of me?" He took a deep breath. "I think now you can start building what really matters." She looked at him, searching her brother's features for the hatred she expected to find, but saw only compassion. For the first time, Fernanda walked through the property without haste. She observed the trees, the hen house, the barn where she and Thiago used to play as children. Every detail seemed to speak to her, reminding her of what she had abandoned in exchange for a life of appearances. On the ground, she saw a new fig tree sprout, the same one Thiago had planted days before. "Do you still believe in this place?" she asked. "I believe that we only flourish where we truly plant," he replied. The simplicity of his words struck her more than any speech. The proud and haughty woman of yesteryear now felt small and, paradoxically, at peace. In the following days, Fernanda began to help with simple tasks. She cooked, swept the yard, and fed the animals. Batista watched her tenderly. "It's good to see the house full again." She smiled slightly. "It's good to be back home." Thiago watched everything in silence, without asking questions, without demanding apologies. He knew that regret didn't need words, but gestures. Little by little, the place began to have the sounds of life again: laughter, voices, footsteps. One morning, Fernanda found an old box in the attic. Inside were notes, photos, and her mother's will. In one of the letters, Doña Lucia had written, "If the site is ever threatened, trust Thiago. He is the guardian of the invisible." The tears streamed down silently. She ran downstairs, found her brother, and hugged him without saying a word. Thiago returned the hug firmly, and for the first time in many years, they both understood that silence is sometimes the sound of forgiveness. A few days later, Fernanda decided to find out more about holding roots, not out of distrust, but out of curiosity. She opened Thiago's old computer, which he had left on the desk in the farm's office. On the screen, a folder called Mother Project. Inside, there were spreadsheets, contracts, and images of sustainable educational centers scattered throughout the country. She clicked on a presentation: Instituto Raíces, Education, Land, and Future. The logo featured a tree whose roots formed the shape of two intertwined hands. Below, the phrase, "Success is the fruit of the roots we choose to nurture." Fernanda covered her mouth, overcome with emotion.
Thiago entered the room and found her staring silently at the screen. "Did you create all this?" he asked. He nodded, his tone devoid of pride. "It was supposed to be a family project. But when I saw the direction you took, I realized I needed to protect my mother's name." She turned to him, her eyes welling with tears. "And the company that was going to buy the property? It was the only way to prevent the past from being sold. I bought it to save it, not to win." The words were simple, but heavy as rocks. Fernanda approached and held her brother's hands. "I've spent my life trying to be admired, and you've spent your life trying to be faithful." He smiled slightly. "Perhaps they're two different ways of seeking love." The two walked to the orchard. The wind rustled the leaves, and the scent of ripe fruit filled the air. "And now?" she asked. "Now we rebuild, but this time, together." Fernanda smiled sincerely, a smile she hadn't been able to give in years. In the following days, she immersed herself in the project alongside her brother. She used her contacts to promote the institute not out of vanity, but out of purpose. Thiago guided her patiently, and she learned to listen. The property gradually transformed into a space of learning and unity. Children began visiting the place for workshops, farmers learned new techniques, and even former neighbors returned to participate in the festivities. What was once a source of shame for Fernanda was now becoming a source of pride. One afternoon, watching a child plant a tree sapling. She commented to Thiago, "You know what's most beautiful? The roots grow in silence." He smiled, gazing at the horizon. "Yes, sis. Silence is the sound of what truly remains." The sky was covered by heavy clouds when Fernanda decided to say what she had been keeping inside. She had spent days working alongside Thiago on the farm, helping with the renovations and the planting, but the weight of guilt still haunted her. "I need to talk to you," she said while he repaired the gate. He nodded, wiping his hands on his pants and waiting. "Why didn't you tell me before?" she asked, her voice wavering. "Why did you let me humiliate you in front of everyone?" Thiago took a deep breath before answering. "Because if I had told you, you wouldn't have learned. Sometimes life needs to make us stumble so we can see where we're stepping." The words spoken calmly completely disarmed her. She lowered her gaze, the tears she had been holding back beginning to roll down her cheeks. "I hurt you so much, Thiago. I said horrible things. I sold our family's image out of vanity." He approached slowly, placing his hand on her shoulder. "I know, but I also know that vanity is born from those who try to fill a void. I just waited for the day you stopped chasing after it." Fernanda hugged him tightly, crying uncontrollably. The sound of the rain began to fall softly, as if the sky were also washing away what remained of the pain between them. "Forgive me," she whispered. Thiago replied with a half smile. "I already forgave you the day you sold the property. That's when I understood that love doesn't need to win, it just needs to remain." When the embrace ended, she looked around and realized how much the place had changed. The walls restored, the garden in bloom, the barn transformed into a meeting hall. Everything rebuilt with patience and purpose. "Did you transform all this by yourself?" she asked. He shook his head. "Not by myself. The land helps those who work for it." In the late afternoon, they walked to the orchard. The wind carried the scent of rain, mixed with the perfume of flowers. Thiago picked up an envelope and handed it to his sister. "What's this?" she asked. "Mother's will. She left it to the two of us, not for the land, but for the promise." Fernanda carefully opened the paper, reading the words she already knew, but which now had a different weight. "May this place remain a symbol of what we were and what we can still be if we choose to take care of each other." Fernanda cried again, but now with a slight smile. "She knew we were going to get lost, didn't she?" Thiago nodded. "Mothers always know. I just hoped we'd find each other before it was too late." As the rain intensified, Fernanda gazed at the horizon. "I want to stay, Thiago. I want to take care of this place. Really help." He looked at her, surprised. "Are you sure? The big city might miss you." She laughed. "Let it. I don't belong here anymore." That night, for the first time, they dined together without tension, without masks, just with good memories and simple plans. Laughter filled the house again, and even Batista commented, "Now the place seems to be breathing again." When they went to sleep, Fernanda looked out the window and saw the lights reflecting in the mud, and she thought that perhaps, in order to flourish, it was indeed necessary to get a little truly dirty. Dawn brought a different atmosphere. The smell of damp earth mixed with bird song seemed to herald a new cycle. Fernanda woke up early, went to the barn, and began organizing old boxes. She found portraits of her mother as a young woman, picking fruit, smiling beside them. It was as if the walls held secrets waiting to be revealed only when her heart was ready. Among the boxes there was an old tape, with a handwritten label, "For my children." Fernanda put it in the old recorder and pressed play. Dona Lucia's voice echoed softly. If you are listening to this, it's because you've grown up. I hope you never forget. The ashes of what we burn can nourish the soil of what is to come. The roots don't die, they just wait for the right rain.
Fernanda cried, clutching the recorder to her chest. Thiago, drawn by the sound, entered the barn. "I thought this tape had been lost," he said with an emotional smile. "I think it was kept safe, waiting for the right moment." Fernanda wiped away her tears. She always knew this place would bring us back together. They then decided to rebuild the barn as a community center for Lucia Batista Institute. The name, chosen by Fernanda, made Thiago smile. "It's beautiful to see you name something that will grow after her." She replied, "It's the least I can do. I took so much. Now I want to give back." During the following months, the site was transformed. Children from the community participated in workshops, farmers learned sustainable techniques, and the name Batista once again became synonymous with unity, not dispute. Fernanda, with simplicity, coordinated the activities with dedication. One afternoon, while painting the barn's facade, she saw a group of journalists arriving. One of them recognized her. "Aren't you Fernanda Batista, the cosmetics entrepreneur?" She smiled, wiping the paint from her hands. "I was. Now I'm just Fernanda. I take care of roots, not packaging." The story unexpectedly went viral, but this time not because of scandal, but because of redemption. The story of two brothers who rebuilt their mother's legacy touched hearts across the country. And when asked who the man next to her in the photo was, she replied, "The true success of the family." The following night, Thiago and Fernanda sat under the old fig tree. The sky was clear, the stars reflected in the puddles, and the air smelled of hope. "You know, Thiago," she said, "I think Mom never wanted us to be independent of each other. She just wanted us to be whole." He agreed, and now we are. The wind blew gently, and the old ribbon, forgotten on the bench, echoed, "Roots don't die." Fernanda smiled, her eyes closed. For the first time, she truly believed it. The following weeks were filled with movement and purpose. The old barn now had new windows, restored walls, and a simple handwritten sign. Lucia Batista Institute, Land, Education, and Family. Every detail seemed to carry a piece of their history. Fernanda took care of communication and events, while Thiago dedicated himself to cultivation and sustainability workshops. For the first time, they were working together and in harmony. "Remember when we used to fight over who could pick the most jaboticaba berries?" Thiago asked, laughing. "I remember. I always won," she replied, teasing with a genuine smile. The light laughter that echoed made Batista stop at the door, his eyes welling up with tears. "Ah, if Dona Lucia could hear you both now."
The institute started small, but soon caught the attention of the community. Children came from rural schools to learn about planting and the importance of conservation. Farmers received training on sustainable agriculture. And on Saturday nights, local families gathered in the courtyard to watch films projected onto the white wall of the barn. One afternoon, a local TV crew showed up to do a report. Thiago tried to hide, but Fernanda gently pulled him back. "This time, you're not going to stay behind the scenes." He protested with a shy smile. "I never liked camera, sis." She replied, "Yeah, me neither, until I learned what they're really for." During the interview, Fernanda spoke emotionally about the project. The Institute is about new beginnings, about remembering that what has been broken can be rebuilt, if there is still love. Her words touched the audience, and for the first time, she wasn't talking about herself, she was talking about us. The story aired and went viral, but in a different way than before. There was no scandal, only hope. People were moved by the story of the brothers who saved the farm and transformed failure into purpose. The Institute's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Donations started pouring in. Schools, NGOs, and even universities offered partnerships. The space took on a life of its own, growing beyond the city's borders. Thiago smiled as he watched the activity, while Fernanda was surprised by the lightness of finally working on something that made sense. One night, when the last visitor had left, Fernanda was alone in the main hall, gazing at her mother's portrait hanging on the wall. "I think you can rest now, Mother. The house is standing again." Thiago appeared behind her, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "And her daughter, too," he replied, handing her one. Fernanda smiled. "Do you know what I learned from you?" "What?" "That the greatest victories don't need applause." He nodded. "Or spotlights." Outside, the cicadas sang and the wind rustled the barn curtains. It was the sound of life breathing again. A few months later, the Institute was already a regional benchmark. The local government officially recognized their work, and a major national broadcaster requested an interview. Thiago tried to refuse, but Fernanda insisted. "You founded all of this. People need to know your story." He sighed. "My story is the story of the farm. Those who have learned to listen are the ones who should tell it." On the day of the recording, the journalist began the interview by asking Fernanda about her past. She took a deep breath. "Yes, I made mistakes. I was arrogant. I lost what mattered, but life has a beautiful way of teaching. Sometimes you have to lose everything to understand what you already had." Her words silenced the studio.
When asked about Thiago, she smiled tenderly. "My brother has always been the heart of the family. While I tried to shine, he was the one who kept the light on." The film crew was moved. Thiago, watching from home, lowered his gaze, his eyes welling up with tears. The interview was a success. The audience was charmed by the transformation of the former businesswoman and by the serenity of her brother, who chose silence instead of revenge. The Institute received even more support, and doors opened for national projects. But more than fame, Fernanda gained something that money could never buy: peace. She smiled without fear again, walked barefoot around the property, and smelled the fresh coffee in the morning. The emptiness she had once tried to fill with applause was now filled with purpose. One morning, she received an email from a large international network offering a partnership with the Institute. "They want to expand the model outside the country," she said excitedly. Thiago just smiled. "So now it's your turn to fly." She replied calmly, "Yes, but this time taking my roots with me." In the days that followed, she prepared the paperwork, but this time she made sure to include Thiago in everything. No decision would be made without him. "The independence I was seeking was loneliness in disguise," she confessed. "Now I understand that freedom is walking together." The following week, the Institute received a tribute in the city. The children gave a presentation, and one of them read a letter. "Thank you for teaching us that what grows slowly grows strong." Fernanda cried, and Thiago held her hand in silence. As the audience applauded, she looked at her brother and whispered, "I think I understand what Mom meant now." He asked, "About what?" "About independence. It's not about leaving the past behind, it's about making peace with it." Thiago smiled, and together they watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of fire and gold. It was the same sky as years ago, but this time there was peace between them. The sun slowly set behind the hills, tinging the sky with orange and pink hues. The air was warm, and the scent of damp earth rose from the freshly watered orchard. Thiago and Fernanda walked side by side, in silence, without needing to say anything. It was the eve of July 4th, the same day that a year ago he had separated the family. Now it marked their reunion. The place was full of life.
Children ran among the trees, families arrived with baskets of food, and laughter filled the air. The Institute had organized a community party to celebrate Earth and Roots Day. Fernanda set the tables, while Thiago tuned his guitar. It was the same music his mother played on quiet childhood nights.
"Do you remember the first 4th of July after Mom passed away?" Fernanda asked. "I remember. You gave the most beautiful speech, and then you left." She smiled with a touch of shyness. "I think I can give another one now, but with the right heart." Thiago nodded. "Then speak, sis. The stage is yours, but the ground is ours." She climbed onto the small platform and observed the audience. Soft lights illuminated smiling faces, and the wind swayed the colorful flags. "A year ago, I was here, and I wanted to sell this place. I thought cutting off the past would set me free, but I discovered that roots don't bind, they sustain." The silence that followed was one of pure attention. "This place is not just land. It is memory, forgiveness, and beginnings. And today, before you all, I want to promise something." She paused, her voice choked with emotion. "I promise never again to run from what made me who I am. I promise to care for the roots, our family, our history, and every life that finds shelter here." The applause came slowly, sincerely. Thiago smiled, discreetly moved. When she stepped off the stage, he embraced her, speechless. The noise of the applause mingled with the sound of cicadas, and the air seemed to vibrate with life. "You know, Thiago," she said, "now I understand why you never wanted to leave here." He replied, looking at the sky, "Because I never needed to." Later, when the party was over, the two were alone under the old fig tree. The thick trunk bore the marks of time, but remained firm. "Mom used to say that this tree only blooms when the heart of the house is at peace," Fernanda commented. Thiago chuckled softly. "Then look up, sis." She raised her face and saw small white flowers sprouting among the leaves. The wind blew gently, causing the flowers to fall around them like snow. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Fernanda knelt and ran her hand along the ground. "This is true independence, isn't it?" Thiago nodded. "Yes, being free to stay." She then placed her hand on the ground and whispered, "I promise I'll never let this place die again." Thiago placed his hand over hers. "And I promise I'll never let you give up again." Their hands, joined on the earth, sealed a pact that neither time nor distance could break. As the moon rose on the horizon, the siblings sat side by side, watching the field illuminated by its silvery light. In the silence of the night, their mother's voice seemed to echo among the leaves. "Roots don't die, my children. They're just waiting for you to come home." Every story has a turning point, but only those that come from the heart make us return to our roots. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel. Here, each video reminds us that love and forgiveness, these are the most valuable legacies that life can leave behind.